Hello, hello, we're live. Welcome everyone. How are you guys doing? Hey Steven, welcome. How are you doing, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well wherever you are. Thanks for joining.
Hi. I guess this is also it's live, it's global. So I mean, happy morning, happy afternoon, happy evening, happy night, wherever you are. I think it's gonna be. I see a lot of like waiting. Oh, I love the GIF. The GIF are always like the best part of the day. So yeah, special brownie points for whoever gets the best GIF out there. Yeah, actually, yeah. If you don't mind, like use the GIF and let us know where you guys are from. Like, and it would be oh, I see like Vinicius dancing. That's that.
Yeah, I see someone's from India. Hello, thanks for joining. Yeah, please feel free to drop where you're signing in from. This is great. Oh, Seattle. Someone said planet Earth. That's good.
Oh, that's good. Yes. Yes. I was wondering if we were gonna to broadcast this one in space. We tried to call Elon and borrow a SpaceX, but it didn't. It didn't work. Maybe next year. Next year we'll do it from space. Awesome. Great. Again, fantastic. Again, we are both like here in the United States, but from different side of it. Like I'm actually right now in Mellow Park. Steven, where are you located today?
Hi, I'm located in Chicago, Illinois. So calling from the Midwest in the US here. Greetings.
So let's give a little bit like while we're having like all the people joining in here, and thank you for flooding here the chat. I love it. That's a lot of love here. So today we're gonna have this like a mini panel, right? We wanted to make it like very friendly, and it's not just friendly in the sense that you're gonna see the two of us here on the screen. Unfortunately for you, but you guys are part of the panel as well. So basically, keep the interaction high. We might drop a couple of like poll questions for you to make it even more interactive. You guys feel free to use text, GIF. We're definitely gonna go into a section of Q&A at the end, and we got a couple of fantastic facilitators that are helping us on the back end. We are in fact talking a lot about front end and back end, I guess, or like front stage and backstage, to be honest. But today, Stephen and I really wanted to start and give you an understanding of two main themes that we keep hearing in the design industry that is mostly focusing on, especially in big companies that we got the opportunity to work with and for. There is this nascent rise of like service design and the way in which it coexists and integrates with product design. Now, we expect here to have a bunch of product design mostly. I did a couple of sessions, and last year I was mostly speaking about what service design is. There was a lot of interest in there. So this year we thought, okay, why don't we talk more a little bit about how those two interact? And that's what we'll be discussing today. Steven, anything else you'd like to add here?
No, I think that's a really great intro. I'm excited to start the conversation. I think service design is a hot topic with all of the industry going into different services. Like when you look at Apple, for example, there's a lot of different services that people interact with. And as well as product design, it's a hot topic as well. So excited to talk through the overlap and the differences there.
And logistic things. So as we mentioned the Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop your question in there or like save some of those for the end. We have a few slides that we will also share with you right after this conversation. There's no secrets here. We do like the interaction, so we probably won't keep that sharing all the time. So we make it probably a little bit more interesting. Now I'm going and going live into the slide, so we can use it to do a couple of like intro about like Steven and I. So
Yep.
let me see if I can go there. And here we are. I guess, yes, here it is. So this is us. And let's start with a little bit of intro on like who we are, because I mean, Steven and I were definitely world famous. You probably have seen us everywhere, but just in case you missed it, in during the last, I don't know, Oscar nights or whatever. My name is Federico Francioni. I go for Fede. I joke every time it's like FedEx without the X, so I get it in the right way. I call myself a designologist because I'm not a designer by trade. I'm a telecommunication engineer. I was born and raised in Italy, and I've been living in California, like in Silicon Valley, here for the last 10 years. So it's been an interesting switch from the medieval Tuscany, a little bit of Milan, and now like in Silicon Valley. Definitely a switch from night and day. Yeah, my account on digital everywhere, you name it, like Threads, X, whatever you wanna go engage, is like Fedino82. Just the interesting note I want to share with you is that I don't have a portfolio. I know that I do a bunch here of like a mentoring session, and we do review a good amount of portfolios here. But like, for example, for specifically my job, I decided not to have one, but I use a combination of my website and my curriculum vitae, my resume. And it's an interesting approach we might want to discuss in our mentee mentorship session if you guys want to. That is all. I'm passing to my fantastic like co-host here.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you, everyone here. So I am Stephen Barros. I am a staff product designer at Meta, focused on design systems right now. Design systems is a passion of mine. I've been working on design systems here at Meta my whole time here. And before that, I was at design agencies where I was a consultant for different brands that focused on not only product design, but service design when looking into fintech, into entertainment, into food industry, just understanding the front stage, the backstage, and like the operations of business has become a passion of mine for the past couple of years. So definitely excited to talk about that in a little bit. As for me, I live in Chicago now. I've been here for a few years. And before that, I was in New York, working in Brooklyn. And then I was raised in California. So I've been all over the place in the US. And so hopefully that kind of shows in my work of like seeing the backgrounds and the environment changing over time. I'm on the socials, Instagram and Threads, also LinkedIn. You find me on stephenbarrows.com. Please feel free to add me. Happy to talk to folks wanting to talk about service design and product design. And I do have a website, stephenbarrows.com. As you know, as a designer, your portfolio is always in progress. So I am on the same boat there. Happy to do portfolio reviews too. So feel free to find me on the socials and we could chat. Thanks for having me.
Oh, also don't tell anyone, guys. I mean, we're trying to definitely gonna try to get Steven on ADPList because apparently he's not yet. So peer pressure for you.
Yeah, no, I just signed up actually. So I'm excited to get some mentees and talk through service design, product design, portfolio reviews, if that's helpful. So excited to meet folks.
Great, awesome. Okay, well then, let's get it started. Like, let's get into a little bit of the one of the first thing that we want to discuss. We're not starting. First of all, I think we want to start with like getting a little bit of a poll and understanding a little bit of our audience. You know, as designers, we're always trying to understand who are the people that we're talking to. So I'm trying to send out right now a very publishing the first poll in here. Yes, here it is. Oh, sorry, I think I closed it already. It's open. Yeah, but okay. We got this poll live right now, where we like to understand what's the distribution of the people here. And I guess you can vote whether you're a product designer, a service designer, or something else. Sorry, we didn't want to discount if you don't feel like you belong to one or the other. We just wanted to make a little bit of clarity in here. And I love now. Look at this, like how the votes are swinging. We like to understand our audience. So fantastic. Keep voting for a while. What I was saying is that in the flow of this conversation, we wanted to intentionally start with service design. And why? We know that, and we were assuming that most of you guys, like the data are confirming, were mostly product designer. interested in the space and understand, okay, what the heck is a service designer? I've worked with some of them, but you guys are so weird, or I never know. Maybe I am also service designer. I didn't know. So that's how we're trying. We wanted to clarify. Okay, what is a service design first, and what are the things that we do? I would say, and I would love also to get your feedback, Stephen. The most
Mhm.
difficult question that we get all the time, it is the definition of service design.
Yeah.
Like probably every definition is, but it's especially tricky for us because again, we suffer from the fact that we are not as a common service designer as like the product, so we are not as established probably like
Mhm.
in across the industry, even the big ones. So for me, my definition of a service designer, it's someone that can really look into end-to-end flows and experience, and understand the implication on the backstage and front stage, to create overall the best experience.
Mhm.
That's the way I would summarize the what the service designer does. What will be your definition of service design?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's hard to distill it down to one sentence. But it's similar to yours in that it's a designer that can look at the end-to-end journey for different swim lanes, and I'll call them like customers, looking at the end-to-end journey of how folks interact with the actual product or service, and then also looking at the folks involved in building that product and service, and then looking into the business and how that impacts how's that impacted throughout the end-to-end journey. And so it's this kind of design process that's able to jump in the different swim lanes.
Sweet. I like a swim lane, so I have to use that more. I really love the term. I never I love the sport analogy. Yeah, and I also love something that you mentioned. We're gonna mention, I guess, like even more in the next 50 minutes that we have left. Stakeholders. Yeah, stakeholder
Yes.
management is a big part, and where the guests we're also gonna mention workshops, because that's one way to engage stakeholders, right? That
Mhm.
is probably a typical like a duty of the service designer. But okay, let's jump to like the slide that we prep. Let me close the poll for now. I think we got it. Like 62% of you guys are product designers. So thank you for your
Great.
love and thank you for being here. So this very simple slide that we wanted to start with is that okay, then you guys have been talking about stages. You'll be talking about like back end, front end, or front stage, backstage. What does it look like, and why are you keep like saying that all of the time as service design? So it's very easy. Basically, think about an experience like you go into the theater, right? And this is a very nice graphic that I found online that like you'll find also in the sources of the deck. But when you do and you went to the theater, you are experiencing as a spectator the front stage. So you sit down there, and in front of you, there's a very talented person performing something for you, right? That's your main experience that you do. So it's basically where all the action happen, right? But in order for that to exist, there is a backstage. The backstage are like all the people that are working behind, all the people that have been like doing the makeup, all the folks that have been creating the costumes, all the folks that are working with the lights, the sound, and even all the logistics in case it's like a concert and you have to build a stage, I don't know, in a stadium or something like that. So there is no front stage without the backstage. Now, typically, product designer, and again, I don't want to generalize, but they're really hyper focused on a lot of like front stage application or presentation. But as a service designer, what we mean by we say end to end is that we need to develop an understanding of the front stage and the backstage to really
Mhm.
define if I want to throw the best concert experience, who are the best sound makers that I can hire, for example, right? What is the best location? Where can I go? Maybe I can go to Chicago in the winter, but I probably wouldn't go in a stadium outside because it might be a little bit chilly, right? So there are implications of the backstage that strongly impact the way you craft your front stage. Steven, anything else you would like to add here?
Yeah, I love this. I love this analogy because when you think of like the entire performance in general, you know, front stage, backstage, behind the scenes, they all depend on each other for the performance to go well and go well for the audience. And so they're almost equally important, but they bounce off each other really well. And so with the role as a service designer, you're able to work, in kind of like a horizontal way and check in on all of these different stages, right? Like the front stage, the backstage, behind the scene. Like you have almost like the ability to change altitude and see like how folks are working and what's working well, what's not, and then have that conversation using different artifacts. So I love this analogy. I think it's really important. And as a product designer, yes, you tend to operate in the front stage, but your impact could be in the backstage and behind the scenes. And we can discuss that in detail in a little bit. But this is a great analogy to talk about service design in general.
And let's go behind the scene. Why do we have the behind the scene? Like the reason why we need to think about behind the scenes, especially as service designer. But I will argue that this is also a part that I touched a lot in my mentoring session with a lot of product designers, is that you need to understand the rationale and what's behind the things that you're creating, right? Um, I always say that I don't even like to call myself designer or people designer or creative. We were discussing with Steven when we met the first time. I love to call people makers. Like in this industry, especially if you work in a big company, you're making something, right? If you're a maker, you can be an engineer, you can be a designer, you can be whatever, right? It's the collaboration of makers that make things happen. If you don't ship something, if you don't create a value, then you're not a maker and you're probably doing the wrong job. So in order to be a successful maker, you need to understand, why am I even making these things, right? It's not it's not that you're going like, I don't know, when you're on the beach and you build like a sandcastle, you're like, well, maybe it's like just to waste a little bit of time because you're bored. But like when you're working, there are some implication coming. And
Yeah.
those implications might coming from finance, coming in general from the business. There might be some law implication, compliance. It's important to understand that these are the reasons that are informing my design, and this is why
Mhm.
what I'm doing. So while for product designer, it's like a way to stay informed and be even more, let's say, structured in the way they think about it. So it's not only shape and form, but it's really understanding, hey, I'm really trying to move the needle of these criteria, of this KPI, of these things that people want, right? Stickiness, engagement, adoption. You need to understand which one of the nuances you want to really work on. For
Mhm.
service designer, this is even more important because some of those behind the scenes can become also limitation. So,
Yep.
for example, I mean, everyone knows about GRDP in Europe, like, and the way it's been changing the way you have to treat data. Or I don't know, maybe tomorrow there is a new law that comes out in the US that changed the way, like, they have to make videos, right? You never know. So something that happens behind the scenes impact both the backstage and the front stage. And as a service designer, you need to make sure that the entire chain is actually ready to bend or adapt without breaking.
Mhm.
What have you seen in your experience, Steven?
Yeah.
Any funny behind the scenes stuff?
No, that's no, I love the way you put it, and we're all makers. I think that is a really good kind of analogy as well, because when you say maker, you're implying that we tinker, right? Like we constantly trying to tinker something, and we're working at it so that we can iterate. And as a product designer, it's almost like your job is never finished. Like once you launch the thing, whether it's a product or service, you have to consider your implications for launching that. You have to consider, metrics. You have to consider how it impacts the business. All of that is the behind the scenes that you're talking about. And so, as a product designer, if you think about service design, you're able to have that in the back of your mind as you're designing these products or service, and see how it impacts the backstage, how it impacts the behind the scenes. So you're able to, if you can, as a product designer, zoom out and look at the broader implications, your product or service is going to be only better. So I think I like where this is going, is like showing that product designers can have, like this aptitude to be a service designer as well, or take some tools and some learnings from service design to become a better product designer.
In terms of like tips for product designer, one thing that I think I mentioned in every session is, you want to be a better product designer. Even if you're not a service, it doesn't matter. But as a product designer, be sure that you know why you're making that design choice. Like if you can say that, hey, during your product review or whatever you're doing, whenever you're showcasing whether it's your portfolio or the work you're doing, it actually doesn't make any difference because you're a maker. But when you're showing what you're making, telling that, hey, this decision are intentionally made to affect this baseline, right? Or making sure that we get the best out of this dimension that we want to move, right? If you can speak in that terms, especially if you are interested in working in big companies, or if you're reviewing with people that might not be very familiar with the design, or might even be skeptical about your design, right? Because they can be, okay, why are you forcing for something, for example, some friction in here, right? As a product designer. And then the strong answer from a product designer is that I'm doing this one because, I mean, you're trying to get more time on a screen or something in order to, again, get to that I would call like success metrics or KPI. That's a great way of doing it. So that's one way in order to talk about like the behind the scenes. The other thing I would say, when you design something, you want to be able to speak to the cost of your design.
Yeah.
Now, we're not all like there. I'm sure there will be some unicorns here, right? Or like the full stack designers that can do the front end and the back end. Amazing for you guys, but especially in when you work in a big company, you will have very dedicated design team and very dedicated engineering team. So in that ecosystem, it's not that because you're two different teams, you have to forget about like the fact that engineering exists and they have to code, right? So the other thing about almost like a sort of backstage is, okay, you can design the best front stage experience ever, but will you actually be able to deliver it? Like, how much power are you going to use to are going to consume, right? How much complicated wiring you're going to require? How many people does it take to even assemble the overall stage? Like, these are all analogy now that we're using like this image right here. But think about that, because if your design still gets too complicated, even for people to code, you're probably not going to be successful. You're going to be a great creative mind with a great idea, but again, it's all about shipping stuff. So if a product designer creates something that it takes 5 months to deliver, it's probably not the best design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my experience as well. Like when you think of when you go back to the definition of what product design is, like we talked about the definition of service design, but we're what 60% product designers in here. Like we all have like our own definition of what product design is. When it comes down to it, it's the process of ideating, developing, refining a product that meets a specific market and like user need, right? And when you're doing those things, with your cross-functional teams, engineers, product managers, content designers, etc., you have big picture implications to the process to which you work with these folks, the cost of how much time you're spending and how much time your cross-functional teams are spending on this design, and then your brand's overall position in the market, right? Like you have to consider all of these things as a product designer. And if you think as a service designer, you're able to see visually like what stages are being impacted, the front stage, the backstage, behind the scenes, and then talk about your process as a team, whether that's before you start the project, during the project, or even after you launch the project. So these are all kind of important implications that you have to think of when working in a big company.
Nice. So I'll do this. Like time check was at 10:24. So we got like still 35 minutes. I'm seeing that there are a lot of questions already in the Q&A. I love it. I would say for all the people listening, make sure that you check those Q&A that has been created. Make sure that you upvote the one that you like, because we can get into those conversations as soon as possible. I see that there are a few, and we're here just to provide clarity to you guys. And I think the best way is to answer your question, not for us doing any sort of pseudo TED talk, because we're not that kind of people. Like, I guess we like
Yeah.
to be practical. So yes, we're moving there. So please take a look on the Q&A and upvote the question that you really like. We're going there like sooner even than we expected. If you're okay with that, Steven. I think
Yeah,
mostly
definitely.
I just wanted to jump on another slide uh, that that might be interesting for you guys on this like very high level conceptual slide, because eventually we promised that we were talking about, okay, how are you guys working in a big company, in a big enterprise? How have you seen like a service design and product design working? So this is probably the last slide we can discuss before getting into Q&A. But the idea is that still there is no clarity for what I've seen in the last at least 10 years more. Uh, Service design is finding its footing together with product design. It's getting better. But if we were to define how the two interact, it will be through this sort of like very simple visual. Like you got the service design scope, if you wish, in green here, and you got the product design in light blue. So the best way to differentiate them, but also the best way to understand how they coexist, is really talking about that the breadth and the depth. So as you can see here, we discussed the front stage, the backstage, and the behind the scenes. So I will consider you guys all expert about that. When you look into that, a service designer scope definitely cover each one of them, where the behind the scene is actually fading away a little bit more because, of course, as a designer and creative, we do not own the subject matter expertise of everything behind the scene. As an example, we're not lawyers, we are not policymakers, right? So whatever is behind the scenes, maybe about contracting, right, or whatever that is, we need to understand, but we are not the people actually creating and knowing that subject matter expertise. We're not talking to them, right? So that's why you would see that part down on the right fading. But eventually, a service designer will take care of the breadth of the end-to-end experience. So we want to make sure that you can start left, you can start right, and you can argue, Stephen. I would like to get your thought on that as well. Like, where
Mhm.
is the better to start? But eventually, you have to cover everything in here, right? So that's where we go, and you will say that in every experience flow that you build, you will always find that there are vertical solution or vertical products that you have to interact. So that actually works every time like that in a big company. But let's use our typical analogy, right? We said if you are going to a concert, right? Think as a user, you're definitely going to go into some website to understand, okay, what the concert is, right? And maybe it's like the artist website, or I don't know, the Instagram or whatever it's going to be. Then let's say you buy the ticket, then you go another website that is the ticketing system, and that's where you buy the tickets, right? And again, as I said, as an example, then when the day of the concert come, you go in there, and maybe there is a nice food ordering system. Maybe there is like a wayfinding to get to your seat. So you see that each one of these like light blue areas can be a completely different app, platform, tool, you name it, that is built by a completely different product pod.
Mhm.
So the analogy that we want to use for like working in big company is the same. Like as service designer, we will never own the entirety of the ticketing system or the entirety of the food ordering like tool. That will be always owned by product manager, product designers, because they will own even the interface of those. But as
Mhm.
service designer, we want to find a way to make them coexist. So, for example, if I am just Fede trying to book a ticket for, I don't know, Beyonce, right, or Taylor Swift, I should find the way to do it in the easiest way possible. So I don't have to get crazy to find a ticket, or I shouldn't get crazy about like finding my seat or going back home if I paid my parking, right? Something like that. So that's the analogy. What would you like to add, Stephen?
Oh yeah, yeah. I love that analogy too. You're coming up with so many good analogies, Fede. I think with the graphic that you have here, it shows that product design can go deep into different parts of the breadth of work, right? And to Fede's point, when working in a big company, there are different product, we'll call them pods, like small teams that are focused in one area. There could be a team that's focused on growth, so just bouncing off the analogy of a Beyonce ticket platform, um, growth could be someone that is working on entry points of like getting folks into the ticketing platform, and trying to get folks to buy more tickets. And we're talking entry points. There could be a team that's focused on the back end. So like, what does that look like in terms of handling so many users wanting to buy Beyonce tickets all at once? Is there a timeout page that you have to design as a product designer? Probably. Is there a cart page that you have to do with it, like a confirmation page? You have to design that as well. So there's like different teams focused on different areas. With startups, it's like you could be the designer that's designing the entire experience. But as a product designer, if you're working with someone with the service design kind of mentality of looking at how the front stage, the backstage, and behind the scenes are impacted by your designs, then you're able to create a design that works for everybody that's involved. And if your design doesn't work, then maybe it's an MVP or a different version of your design. And then you could slowly iterate to where you want it to be. So as a product designer, your job is to come up with that story of, if we can't design the perfect design that I came up with, how might we get closer there, and what does the timeline look like, so that we can have like this vision of the kind of ideal ticketing platform for Beyonce. So definitely there's a lot of skills as a product designer where you could focus on one area, but if you are able to have the aptitude or the skills as a service designer to look at the end-to-end picture, the impact is so much better for the users that are going to use the product or service.
I love it. I think that's great. I Let me drop one thing to close this out. I got another. I love to publish these polls. I'm guilty. Let me see. Let me stop sharing and see if the poll goes live. So we're curious at this point. In your experience, guys, so far, where have you mostly created like those applications? Because in if we were, I mean, if I'm asking myself this question, because I like to do it to myself, asking myself the question that I ask to everybody else, is I think that historically, at least 70% of the distribution will be in the front stage. The backstage, yeah, is usually 30%. So there are designers, even like me, because I'm, as you guys know, like in my entire career, some of those you might know that I've been working mostly on the people side, on employee experience, so internal platform, not the Instagram of this world, right? Backstage is usually 30% maximum of like of the distribution that I've seen as the totality of designer, and there is no designing behind the scenes, because basically the behind the scenes is mostly process and people. Yes, there are some company that create tool just for that, but it's probably not. It will be in the core business of that enterprise, right? It will be, I don't know, maybe an example would be Workday, right? They do everything in the HR realm, but like they're specific there. They have designer that design that tool because that's their subject matter expertise area. Uh, Curious here to see the distribution, but it seems similar.
Yeah, yeah, and with my experience, where I mostly created applications or experiences for, um, I think when I'm working as in a design system, I'm mostly operating in the backstage, I would say. And the reason being is that I'm creating a library or updating a library that other designers are kind of using, that they can then design for the front stage. And so when working on a design system, you have to consider how these components can be reused of other teams wanting to use it for their front stage designs. And sometimes the conversation is bigger in that there are some components that start to establish patterns, start to establish paradigms of navigation, and then that kind of bleeds into the behind the scenes, because you have to consider, in a big company like Meta, you have to consider, how does this product or service fit within the other apps that is part of the offering of this company. So if you're at a big company, you have to consider those implications, and sometimes those conversations might need to be with leadership. So you're creating, as a product designer, you're creating artifacts to have those conversations. So you're creating decks, you're creating like a vision, kind of sprints, and you're kind of trying to tell the story of these designs have a much larger implication, and here's why. Those are a few examples of how I kind of operate, not only in the backstage, but in the front stage and the behind the scenes.
Sweet. What do you think, Steven? We go on the Q&A section because we got like a bunch.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, then let's see in here. Like number one, let me see. Yeah, okay. See, I love. Look at this backstage. They're bringing out on the front stage the question.
That's so cool.
Yes, and we also need to share some love with our folks helping us. We got Sarah and in the background helping in the backstage. Why do I keep saying background? My brain is fried and it's only Wednesday. Oh my god. Okay, sorry guys. I always had difficulty in separating product design from service design. Welcome to our life. How exactly do we differentiate, and what are similar factors? Steven, you go for that one because you are more of the hybrid here.
Yeah. I think it might be helpful to give a little context as to what my background is. So I do have a background in service design. There were some times where I worked in the design agency world, where we would have to consider the service design of like a fintech product. And so as a product designer, I would just kind of operate as a service designer, but then make time as a product designer to create products. So that, just wanted to give the context before I answer that question. And so this is a really good question, is like there is kind of difficulty in separating product design and service design. I think it's just like the altitude in which you're working is the big difference. So with service design, you're at a higher altitude, meaning that you're able to take a step back and look at the broader end-to-end journey for, like I mentioned before, the swim lanes. So you're looking at the customer journey, the people building the customer journey, and you're also looking at the business journey through customers using this service or product. So that's what you are as a service designer. For product design, you're looking at a very specific feature set that could be an end-to-end flow, but you're looking at the interaction design, the visual design, you're doing some product thinking. And so like you're working on those kind of, I guess, verticals to kind of impact, the kind of user need or solve for the user need. So I think that to me is the big difference, is altitude, like where you're operating.
I will add one thing, that is, you will find in many companies that service design doesn't exist, and those people will be showing up as a product designer, UXR. I would probably say more like UXR as UX researcher, and that is tricky, right? Because the fight that we're fighting as service designers is that if you don't have your role and responsibility well designed in a company at any level and every size, then even the hiring process is different. But the reality is, like, let's assume, let's call myself a service designer, because why not? If I were to be going through like a hiring process of a product designer, I will 100% fail that. 100%. There is no way I'm going to pass like a product designer, like a hiring process, like any big company for sure. UXR maybe ish, right? But that is the problem. Like we need to like the fight that we're trying to fight while we do also this chatting with many other service designer in the space, are we need to hire people asking the right question.
Mhm.
So we need to hire for a service designer if we need a service designer. We don't need to hire a UX researcher that can also do the service designer, because that's not the way it works and not the way it's scalable.
Yeah. Yeah, and the one thing to add about like hiring the right folks, like service designers on teams, what I've found helpful in working in a big company is that if your team allows it, creating a what I call a virtual team. So creating a team that essentially focuses on service design specifically, even if they don't have product service designers as a vertical, create that virtual team that tackles these types of problems and uses service design artifacts like user journey maps and service blueprints as a start. And that's what I found really helpful in working in a big company is if we don't have service designers, at least create a service design role on your own. Be in between your meetings, in between your work, and like really hustle to create this small team that focuses on service design methods and projects, so that you can build that excitement and build the impact that service design can do on your given org.
Love it. I guess we go to the next section. Sarah is reading our minds. Unbelievable. Uh,
Oh,
how do you? She's laughing on the back channel. Like I said, this tool is awesome. Also has the back channel, not only the chat, the back channel. I love it. How do you introduce service design principles and methods in projects or companies focused on digital experiences? Hmm. Go, Sarah. Are you ready? I saw you're ready to
This
go. Go
is a
for it.
good one. Yeah, yeah. I think it's just it's kind of related to what I was just talking about, creating a virtual team. I think when you are at a smaller company, because I've worked in the gamut of like smaller startups, like design agencies, and then like big companies. And what I noticed is with smaller startups, you wear so many hats. Like you could just do things without going to a different org and like asking permission. And so you create like methods for your team because you need to, right? Because you're a startup and you just like short on resources if you don't have any. And so you can just start the service blueprint, start a journey map of what the customer is going through, and that's a good start. Whereas in your big company or even a design agency, you have to create that virtual team and find folks that are passionate about looking at the big picture implications, and talk together, meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, and talk about principles and methods individually. I do this thing with my virtual team where we just go like round robin and just go one by one in whoever's in the meeting of good methods, good principles that I found on the internet, and we just talk about them. And that influences the work because then we can take that to our specific teams and start to build that practice. I'll give you an example. So, working on a design system, you often work with what we refer to as partner teams. So, anyone that's using the design system. And there's different stages that the partner teams go through in working with a design system. It's the kickoff, it's the design workshopping, it's the launch of the product, and then the post launch, which is like kind of iterating on the components that you worked on with them. You have to design that engagement journey of all these partners. And so myself with a service design background, I designed that journey and created an artifact of like that service blueprint. And that journey I was able to take to another design system, and someone was able to run with that as a template. So that impact can go large if you could just create this virtual team within your org to kind of talk about these methods and principles.
Love it. I love the practical example. I hope you guys, it's helpful for you guys. We're trying to get as much as in the practical stuff as much as we can. But this one, it's got a bunch of vote as well. What are the common deliverables for service designer? I think thank you even for the folks responding in the comments. yeah, you got like most of them are absolutely right. Yeah, we'll definitely need to highlight stakeholder map just as a starter,
Yeah.
because one thing that you will find, it's a difficulty that you will have, especially as the company becomes bigger and bigger, is how do you get progress on your design? How do you make decision on what you're trying to make, right? Remember what I said, if you don't make things at the end of the day, you're not doing anything. So progress is everything, especially in big companies. Sometimes you can make progress with a wireframe, and sometimes it takes like a high fidelity prototype, but it really progress, it's like the art of making progress is one of the most important thing at a big company. And sometimes you will find that there are many cooks in the kitchen, especially if you are designing something end to end, right? Again, in the example of the concert, you might have the head of ticketing, you might have the head of costume, I don't know, the chief lighting officer, right? Whatever, and you have to work with all of them. Now, it's important to understand who are the decision makers and who the influencers are. Actually, let's adjust my English as much as I can, because that's very important. Like, you want to make sure that your cross-functional stakeholders, that's how we call it, like very often in the industry, they're all engaged, but you need a stakeholder map to understand, okay, this is the core team that is actually building the solution. These are the people that are going to be informed and consulted to build that stuff. It's a very typical RACI, RACI. If you've never seen it, just Google it. Like, it's a very simple table in which you have the roles and the people that are working on it. But the nuance to the RACI is, can I understand and identify which one of these people is just an influencer versus which one is also a decision maker? And usually the decision maker is the person that can resolve an escalation. So in case there, I mean, some challenging things to fix, who is the person that has the right to decide? So, for example, is the artist agent that get to decide what kind of makeup and costume, or is actually the creative there that are actually connecting with the people building the stage that are all going for the color red, but the artist hates red, so they want it blue, right? I know I'm watering down a lot, but that's just trying to understand. So stakeholder map, absolutely important. If you can elevate it to be like a racy with influencer and decision makers, that's the best to me. Which artifacts would you highlight, Steven?
Yeah, yeah. I like service blueprints a lot. Journey maps, I think, are very helpful. I think as a product designer, though, we're in a unique position to build these artifacts visually really easily, right? Like, we have the visual design chops, we have the interaction design chops already as like default as a product designer. And so you're able to create these beautiful maps. But I think it's important to know that as you're starting out with creating these deliverables as a service designer, is to know that if you treat this as like a product itself, version 1 is not going to be great. It's going to look very empty, but that's okay. That's part of the process, right? Like, you have to create a service blueprint to understand what is the current journey, what is the current blueprint in its current state now. And you might find that you uncover all of these areas that need to improve in the business, and that's part of the artifact. That's the artifact's job, is to have those types of conversations with all of the people involved. And that's you doing your job in creating this artifact. And then over time, you'll iterate that service blueprint and make it a very nice blueprint for everyone, like your cross-functional teams. Doesn't matter what your role, you're able to look at this blueprint and know that you've got input from all of the folks involved in this product or service, and it's iterated over time. So that's at least my take on that.
There is one more that I would like to add, only for this one. That is, this one you will find in every job application of every service designer. If there is one thing that really differentiates what a service design do, is a design thinking session. Now, I know that some UXR and product tend to do it, but service designer is, like, at least in the industry, I'm not saying that product designer or UXR shouldn't do design thinking session, I'm not claiming that, just before someone says that, but I'm saying that everyone can do a design thinking session if they know how to do it and if they study the combination of art and science in how to do those design thinking sessions. But my experience is that service designer you will find in every JD. I can bet you, like, let's $5 if you can find a JD that doesn't have this one in there. But all the service designer need to know that the part of the stakeholder involvement and management is also the alignment that you want to get from there.
Mhm.
So to do everything that Steven was mentioning, in order to craft that blueprint, you need to get them aligned. Now, I believe there is nothing like a really good design thinking session in person that you can do to move things forward, especially after 3 years of COVID. People now are dying and they really want to get in a room together and share, and they forgot how effective they are doing things together. So please consider that. It's not that easy. You will find out that one of the biggest issue I've seen in companies is when people that don't understand what a workshop is versus like a design thinking session, they try to do it and run it with a couple of, like, nice icebreaker, post it on a board. That's not what it is, right? Design thinking is not that stuff. And we have a lot of folks that are like improvising that in the industry and say, oh, we're going to do a workshop. So I can tell you that one of the fights that I've been fighting is you need to know how to do this session. You need to plan this session, right? You need to design them in a certain way to make people even feel in a certain way across even multiple days, and then get to that alignment. If you improvise what you call a design thinking session one day from another, you're going to fail. It's going to be terrible, right? So one thing that you guys want to keep in mind if you're interested in being service designer is how do you actually build a design thinking session, and what does it mean? Because that is key. People are always the key in what we do, because no matter what we make, people will be using that tool. So again, I'm a huge people person. If you discount people, you're never going to do this job right.
Yeah.
You go for this one, Steven. That's all.
Yeah. So how do we identify the target audience when we think about service design? And is it the customers or business that's helping the customers? Oh, wow, that's a good question. I think identifying the target audience when we think about service design, I think when you create artifacts like service blueprints and you start to map out what the customer is going through in this product or service that you're a part of, I think that naturally you start to define the target audience. Now, if you're working in a big company, you probably already have that refined or defined by a UXR team, which is like user research, and that's okay. But I think as you build this artifact as a service blueprint or journey map, then you can revisit those definitions of who the target audience is. And I think when making decisions around like updates or changes to that target audience, that could be based on data that you received, but also it could be about the back end, the backstage, right? Where there's business folks that really want to drive a certain metric. And so just understanding what the target audience is, the changes, and being driven by the backstage, like business, is something that can be a conversation over a service blueprint. So you're able to like take this artifact and go to the right people and really understand the target audience. And that's my experience. But I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
No, I think it's a really well said.
Great.
I can see. Job description, I'll put it maybe a generic title of product designer. What gives you insight when talking with the company client that what they need is more service design? Huh. Uh, well, I would say own your craft.
Mhm.
And if you own your craft, and it might take some, of course, year of experience, right? If you just started, you won't be able to probably answer this question. But after it, whether you are like someone that just started their professional journey, or someone that is actually uh, becoming like a very serious expert, I think that the mindset that we have to keep, especially as service designer, is, are we really challenging the status quo?
Hmm.
Like what I'm saying is, a lot of the time, in big companies, you hear things like centralized app, centralized experience, or one stop shop, right? All these crazy word, and then you realize that the scope of the tool that gets created, it's not that big. The problem they're trying to solve, it is narrow, and more than everything, the experience solved that they're solving for is just partial. So as a service designer, I think the very first step that I do every time are not only, the infamous or famous five whys, like keep asking five times why you're doing something. I do it in the interest of, are you really pushing the boundaries? Are you really trying to solve for, I mean, eventually what you think your problem is, or are you solving for the entire company? And if I can use an example of something that is much closer to what I do, right? Are you trying to solve for something about outreaching like a potential candidate and someone that you want to hire, and create a better tool to, I don't know, communicate with a person, a candidate you want to hire? Great idea, great solution, great tool, but is it solving for just that part of the hiring process, or you want to solve for the entire hiring process? So
Mhm.
I think we need to understand, is there an appetite to solve for the big thing, or is just a single problem that you want to solve? Because this is really the core of the our service designer manages it. You need to be able to go and talk with those senior stakeholder and say, hey, this is the scope, this is huge, are we ready to solve for all of this? Do we have the sponsorship, aka do we have the money, the time, and the people to do that, or not? Because I think as a service designer that if we only solve for this one, we're just creating a very efficient silo, but we're not solving for the big picture. So
Mm.
that's, I think, is the best answer that I can give it to you when I'm processing a problem, and reading a job description is similar to that.
Yes. Yes. And one thing I want to add to this conversation with my experience is when creating these artifacts as for service design, what you also want to keep in mind is like what are the metrics that this artifact will improve upon, and that can range from different things. That could be a process related thing. I'll give you an example. As a design system, sometimes what we uncover when building out these service blueprints is there's a lot of duplicative work that happens with engineering sometimes, and when you map this out on an artifact and you share it with managers, you're able to have a very specific metric like hours gained by removing this duplicative process. That could be hundreds of hours that engineers can save because we had this conversation and because this artifact was built. We were able to have that conversation with leadership in removing a duplicative process, and that is the metric for building this artifact. That's amazing. And so as a product designer in a big company, you're able to save time, and that's huge for clients. I think that you could just build the end-to-end journey and have a better narrative, like have a better story for your client, so that they're able to see the big picture and where they need to spend their money. Because it's all about, when you have a client at a design agency, it's like, how much money am I spending? Like, how much money can I save, right? So if you're able to build a journey map for the customer, they're able to pick certain areas that they want to pay extra money for, because it's like you visualize the value with this artifact. So those are just a few examples. I could talk all day about this because I have experience in design agencies and companies, but happy to talk more at another time.
Okay, final stretch. Let's see if you can answer a few more, like in like 30 seconds each. Like we'll do one, and one.
Cool.
Is service design and product management the same? I would say no. There is a big areas of overlap. I would say mostly in big companies, product manager are the gateway to design teams and engineering, but they don't do a lot of stakeholder management from the business side. So the gateway to the engineering means that they will answer all the questions related to product strategy, etc. But they don't even know what the stakeholder maps at large looks like. So because the product pods, remember the visual we show you, they're very vertical. They will own the product strategy that is by definition smaller than the end-to-end scope of a service design project.
Yes.
Let's go.
The best way to transition really quickly is just to, as product design to service design, is just start creating artifacts. Create a service blueprint, look it up on how to build that, look up journey maps, start there. That's a really good starting point. Visualize, tell that story, and then iterate it over time. I think that's the best way. And what mindset shifts do designers need to make when moving from product design to end-to-end services, expanding their perspective? I think look up service blueprints. We talk about it a lot, but once you pick up books or look up, examples of service blueprints, you'll start to understand what is an end-to-end service versus a specific product, and how that fits in the big picture. That's my rapid fire answer. I could talk more about that, but it looks like we're running out of time here.
Yeah, I would say at this point, because we're at time and we got a few other meetings here to to attend in our day to day. I mean, first of all, thank you. I would say I'll check with Sarah and see if there's a way for us to download those questions, and or maybe I would say for each one of you that was asking that question, if you don't mind copying it and sending to us like via LinkedIn or whatever, we can definitely follow up in the coming days. But I mean, again, Steven, first of all, thanks for being here. And I think it was a nice three-way conversation because we got the two of us and then all the fantastic audience. Thank you guys for attending.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for your time. You could have been anywhere else, but you're here with us. So thank you so much. Hope you learned something from today's session. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Threads. And hope you all have a great day.
Go Threads. Bye, guys. Have a great rest of the festival. Enjoy.
Bye.